Coming up on The World Today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says its attempts to minimize casualties in Gaza are not successful. Palestinian group Hamas denies having weapons or control center in Al-Shifa Hospital. Plus 11 people, including 8 children, killed in Myanmar after military jet airstrike bombards a school. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the military is doing all it can to get civilians out of harm's way amid its war in Gaza, but its attempts to minimize casualties are not successful. Mr. Netanyahu's comments came during an interview with U.S. media on whether the killing of thousands of Palestinians in retaliation for the October 7 attack by Hamas would fuel hatred in a new generation. Mr. Netanyahu adds that any civilian death is a tragedy and Hamas is doing everything to keep them in harm's way. Palestinian civilians have borne the brunt of Israel's weeks-long military campaign, which has come in response to the attack by Hamas that Israel says killed 1,200 people, mostly civilians. Well, Israel says it has found the bodies of 2 hostages near Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza. Yehudit Weiss, a 65-year-old recovering from cancer, and Israel Defense Forces Corporal Noah Marciano. Israel's military spokesperson says troops found the bodies in a building near Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza. An army statement says the body was identified by forensic examiners and the family had been informed. Well, Hamas denies operating out of medical facilities in Gaza as Israeli forces continue their operation at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Hamas representative Osama Hamdan further dismissed the idea that Hamas is also operating out of other hospitals in Gaza as lies and condemned U.S. support for them as silly and stupid. An Israeli military official claimed earlier in the week that Israeli commandos are searching through every building and every floor of Al-Shifa Hospital, and new information keeps emerging.
Those weapons were not in Shifa. There is no center or control room for Hamas in this hospital. We avoid all the hospitals all the time. The Israelis, they have said that about Al-Rantisi Hospital, and they were lying. They've said that about Al-Quds Hospital, and everyone realized that they were lying, and now everyone is watching their lies, even with the support of the United States administration, which is a very silly and stupid support, because you can't just believe Netanyahu, who is a liar, and everyone knows that.
Well, Israel needs to ensure protection for civilians as it looks to expand military operations in Gaza. These are the words of the U.S. State Department, assuring reporters at a briefing that it's an active conversation between Washington and Israel. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters that Washington has also expressed concerns to Israel about American citizens in the West Bank being unable to transit through Israel.
I will say we are in active conversations with the government of Israel about ensuring that civilians can be safe from harm. We obviously saw the step that they took with respect to Khan Yunis. They originally told people to move from the north to the south. We have been in conversation with them to impress upon them that as they continue to look at expanded military operations or ground operations in other ways, in other parts of Gaza, they need to ensure that they are safe, that there are humanitarian corridors for civilians. There's protection for civilians. There are human pauses so civilians can get themselves out of harm's way, and that we can get humanitarian assistance into them, and that there are ultimately places that they can be safe from harm. That is an active, ongoing conversation between our government and the government of Israel. So with respect to the visa waiver program, so we are aware of reports that there are American citizens in the West Bank who are unable to transit through Israel as they are allowed to do under the requirements of the visa waiver program. We have expressed concerns about that to the government of Israel. I won't get into full details of our private diplomatic conversations, but we expect Israel to address those concerns. We expect them to be in full compliance with the visa waiver program, and there are remedial measures that are available to us if they are not. So we have nearly 700 American citizens, legal permanent residents, and family members who have gotten out of Gaza through Rafah Gate. There are a little under 900 who are left. Of that number, around 300 of them or so are American citizens, and the others are legal permanent residents and their family members. We're trying to get more out all the time and remain in contact with the American citizens and family members that are left. In terms of the amount of aid that has gotten in, so a couple things I want to say about that. Number one, yesterday for the first time, fuel moved in to Gaza through Rafah Gate.
In the meantime, the head of the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, General Philippe Lazzarini, believes there's a deliberate attempt to strangle its humanitarian work in Gaza. He is warning that the agency may have to suspend its operations entirely due to lack of fuel. According to Commissioner General Lazzarini, many of its services have already been shuttered, including dozens of water wells, 2 water plants and sewage pumping stations. The agency is supporting more than 800,000 displaced people in the Israeli-besieged Gaza Strip.
UNRWA is now running out of fuel. We will not be able to uphold our commitment to provide for the Palestinian people any longer. I do believe there is a deliberate attempt to strangle our operation and paralyze the UNRWA operation. Without the fuel, we will not be able to bring the relief that we are receiving from Egypt to the people in need. And clearly, if the issue of the fuel is not addressed, we run the risk to have to suspend the entire humanitarian operation. I do believe that it is outrageous that humanitarian agencies are reduced to begging for fuel and forced after that to decide who we will assist or not assist when you have such a large population in a situation of life-saving. The problem, when we talk about life-saving should not be subject of condition or bargaining. Today what we are saying is, if the fuel does not come in, people will start to die because of the lack of fuel. Now, exactly as from when, I don't know, but it will be rather soon than later.
We're still covering this war. Palestinian Red Crescent Society video purports to show Gazans walking in the streets after evacuating Al-Quds Hospital amid fighting between Hamas and Israeli army forces. Al-Quds Hospital, the second major hospital in northern Gaza, has stopped functioning. The Palestinian Red Crescent says the hospital was surrounded by heavy gunfire and a convoy sent to evacuate patients and staff had been unable to reach it. Israel claims to have killed approximately 21 terrorists at Al-Quds in return fire after fighters shot from the hospital entrance. It had released footage it said showed a group of men at the hospital gate, one of whom appeared to be carrying a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. In the meantime, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell says that he is concerned about horrific scenes happening in Gaza and the suffering of both Israelis and Palestinians. The European Union's top diplomat made his remarks on a visit to Israel. He was speaking alongside Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Mr. Borrell also stressed the EU's solidarity with Israel and its support for the country's right to defend itself in line with international law. EU Foreign Policy Chief Borrell is also urging Israel not to be consumed by rage in its response to last month's Hamas attack, declaring that one horror does not justify another.
The first one is clear. We don't need a paper to spread it. It's a message of solidarity. It's a message of support. It's a message of saying to Israel that the European Union is with you, supporting you in your right to defense in accordance with humanitarian and international law. And Mr. President, After watching the horrific events happen in Gaza, near Gaza, I also have to express my concern for the situation in Gaza itself. Today, the United Nations has voted a resolution which I think is important because it is asking in order to give more support to the people who are suffering in Gaza. They are also the victims of Hamas. I am shocked by the human suffering of the Israeli people, but I am also concerned by the suffering of the people in Gaza. And I want to ask you to do your utmost in order to decrease the level of suffering of the civilians. Because I think the international community, I include the European Union, has committed a political and moral fault, not taking enough into consideration the problem, the peace in Palestine and Israel. And our common endeavor and common responsibility is to try to fight in order that no more lives get lost, no more human sufferings. And this is the commitment that I take with me from the European Union to support you to defend yourself, to support you on respecting the laws of war, and support you in building peace. Thank you. Thank you.
And a small group of activists in downtown Seoul, South Korea, are calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. The activists, about 30 in number, displayed 2,000 pairs of shoes, symbolizing Palestinian victims killed in the ongoing war. They also held up signs calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and chanted, "Free Palestinians." They say Palestinian civilians have borne the brunt of Israel's weeks-long military campaign in retaliation for an attack in October by Hamas. And friends and family of Vivien Silva met to commemorate her 2 days after they learned that she had been killed and not taken captive by Hamas in the October 7 attacks, as was originally thought. The Canadian-Israeli peace activist, who had been presumed kidnapped by Hamas, was declared dead on November 14 after her remains were found at her home. Ms. Silva had previously done outreach work with Palestinians in Gaza to end the conflict and decades-long Israeli occupation. Local media said her death was confirmed by her son after her remains were identified through her DNA. Canada is home to the world's fourth largest Jewish population outside of Israel, and communities are relying on campaigns to raise funds similar to the efforts underway in the United States.
An essential part of my trips to Israel was always visiting Vivien in her beautiful home on Kibbutz Be'eri. Cycling or walking through the Be'eri fields with her was a highlight for me. Tragically, Vivien's future was stolen from her, and all the time I had hoped to spend with her in Be'eri or in my home in Canada has been stolen from me too. I can't believe that Vivien won't personally witness her advocacy for a better world bear real fruit. I will miss hearing her voice and, above all, hearing her wonderful laugh. I can't believe I won't see her again.
Such touching scenes there. A Muslim paramedic has been recounting the Hamas attack on October the 7th that killed over 1,400 Israelis, according to some figures. Now, Jamal Waraki, a volunteer for Zaka Search and Rescue Service, says he was shocked by what he saw, as he was one of the first ambulances which got into the conflict zone that fateful day. More than a month after the Hamas attack, Mr. Waraki, a bulky, strong man who had been working as a paramedic for many years, is still visibly shaken as he recounts the morning when he rushed in an ambulance to Be'eri and saw bodies lying around everywhere in the streets on the way.
When I was driving towards Reim, I started seeing bodies thrown out everywhere in the streets. I saw a police car with a police officer shot inside, and afterwards I started seeing the real bad things that happened in Raim. There was the first time in my life I got into a place uh, and I didn't know what to do. I just stood up there shocked, and I had no idea how to start and how to finish. That has nothing to do with Islam. Our religion, as a proud Arabic Muslim Israeli guy, I'm saying that has nothing to do with our religion. Our religion doesn't give us any right to kill any person. Even our Prophet Muhammad, when there was a saying that he said before every war, that we're not allowed to kill elderly people, we're not allowed to kill women, children, and even we're not allowed to kill any person who stands in front of us without a weapon. And everyone who got killed, um, uh, everyone who stays in a mosque or a church or a Knesset, we're not allowed to kill him. Of course, we need to live to each other. It's not a question. It's a need to. I think Israel learned today how to die together. Now it's time to learn how to live together. That's what I believe. Listen, Jews, Arabs, Christians, Muslims, we are all the same. Israel is a big whole body, and every one of us is one part of this body. If one of these parts is missing, the body won't be doing his job as it's supposed to. So I think that we have to take care of this, and we have to stop hatreds and start living together.
And still ahead on the world today. Pedro Sanchez sworn in as Spain's Prime Minister by King Felipe. Details of that and more in a moment. Please stay with us. Let's get to our coverage of the Russia-Ukraine war now. Nearly 20,000 men are said to have fled Ukraine since the beginning of the war to avoid being drafted to fight. Some have swum dangerous rivers to leave the country. Others have simply walked out under cover of darkness. Kyiv confirmed that another 21,113 men attempted to flee, but were caught by the Ukrainian authorities. After Russia's invasion, most men aged 18 to 60 were banned from leaving. But those who were excluded from conscription include men with medical issues, those with caring responsibilities, and fathers to 3 or more children. Well, the VOA's Anna Chernikova joins us now from Kyiv. Anna, good to see you again after a while. Can you tell us, more with regards to this drafting of men by Ukraine to help it execute its defense against the onslaught by Russia?
Good evening. Well, this number was officially announced recently, and according to what we know, especially here from inside of the country, I can tell that in the very beginning, especially in these first weeks of full-scale invasion, most of people managed to either escape or just leave. So at the beginning, it was a kind of a mess, and a lot of people were just leaving and crossing the border. But then, the first weeks of full-scale invasion turned to be, this probably main time slot when men were kind of escaping the country. We've heard and we already discussed there were situations as well, and it was even investigations on that some men managed to escape illegally through the border, and it was a kind of it was this escape mission planned, and those people who were involved in this planning and the organization of this escape were some of them at least are currently under investigation still. Also, we've heard some stories about people paying to get a medical prescription which would say that they are not good for serving in the army, and they were living with this medical prescription, medical paper. So there were different cases, but I can say that now, and it was also confirmed by the Ukrainian authorities, that now and in general, in 2023, the number of those escaping is much less. But of course, we're hearing time to time that new investigations start and new types of escape procedures are in place.
Ukraine is getting, a lot of support from the West, in its defense campaign against, attacks from Russia. So, and, a lot of training is going on with the weapons that are being donated to Ukraine by the US and, other countries in Europe. So how desperate, is Ukraine to have these, youth to, the older generation up to 60 to also train alongside the equipment and, military logistic supports that it's getting from the West?
There are like two sides of this question, because first of all, of course, army needs as much people as possible, and country needs as much people as possible, in terms of as it's usually said that if you are not at the front line, you are behind the scenes, but you are working for the country's economy, and basically a lot of industries actually officially can save their personnel from going to the front line, at least at this point of time, as we're talking, because these industries are critical and important for Ukrainian economy. For instance, it's either like drone production or manufacturers of military-related products, or IT sector. A lot of IT personnel is kind of saved under the law, and IT specialists are working in order to keep economy running. And of course, it's crucial to have those people in the country, or those who are abroad, or some people are abroad legally, also, like working for the country. And inside of Ukraine, there are discussions now to. So basically, the government is thinking of introducing a new law that will allow men to leave legally, but they will have to contribute to the budget of Ukraine with certain financial contributions for the army. So this kind of things are discussed. And second part of the question is that those people who escaped, actually who made it illegally, a lot of military people and also a lot of people who stay in the country say that, well, probably they would have been not that useful either in the front line or inside of the country working for social good. But again, it's very complicated to to say which circumstances those people who escaped had. But definitely Ukraine, it looks like Ukraine will try to find the solution to make this, movements from and back into the country possible. At least this is what government is thinking of, and what we're hearing. Because to be honest, I can say, and this also is confirmed by various surveys, most of people, men and women, either back to Ukraine or remain in the country to support and to fight. So this is, this question has these two sides, and well, it looks like it will be a certain update on that, because those who escaped probably either not going to be back or will be back some time, uncertain time.
Right, and
in the future.
Yes, and Anna, it must be mixed feelings for the government and, of course, for the families of those who are being conscripted. That's, if those that have not lost their, entire families already, because 18 to 40, makes up a lot of youth population of the men in Ukraine. And for those who are not contributing financially, if they have to contribute on the front line and, they lose their lives in the process, this is like, killing off a lot of, the Ukraine's youth population. And when the war is over, what happens?
It's a huge issue, and it's a very really difficult question to discuss and to put opinions, because of course a family who lost someone beloved one, a member of the family, or a son, or brother or husband, of course they will have a completely different view on that than those who did not lose anyone, even if someone remained at the front line, or those who did not go to the front line. And of course, inside the society, this is it's complicated, and it will get even more complicated, of course, as war is ongoing, is still ongoing, and at one point when the war will be over, this will actually be one of the main question of how to support the society from the inside, because it's not only physically difficult, but extremely difficult mentally and psychologically. But I mean, if you look in general at the Ukrainian society and Ukrainian man population particularly, of course, everyone is trying to do what they can do best to support the country, to protect the country, and those who can do it at the front line. A lot of people, went to the front line. Those who feel that they are more useful, next to the front line, they are working hard. But again, some people are actually going to the front line because they have to, not voluntarily, but because they have to according to law, and they get this prescription from military officials. So, I mean, really very complicated question, and we will see how Ukrainian society will cope with that, and how all this will will evolve, because of course psychologically Ukrainian society is feeling a lot of pressure.
Right. Anna, thank you for expanding that conversation, and thank you for your time, and please do stay safe.
Thank you.
Let's move ahead. 11 people, including 8 children, have been killed in Myanmar's Chin state after a military jet bombed a school. Villagers say the strike on the remote village of Vuilu in the mountainous region happened on Wednesday. Myanmar is currently in the grip of a civil war with numerous armed groups fighting the military junta, which deposed an elected government in 2021. Chin State is a stronghold of resistance against the junta. This week, its grassroots insurgency saw ethnic Chin fighters recapture the town of Rikwanda on the border with India. However, locals say there were no insurgents based in Vuilu, which has fewer than 80 households and is located in the south of the state. The picture of Xi Jinping and Joe Biden on a stroll in the Californian country estate continues headlining Chinese media a day after what Beijing has hailed as a historic summit. People's Daily, the biggest state-run newspaper, calls the 4-hour bilateral a new starting point for China-US relations. On social media, many Chinese are calling for a win-win relationship. It's the first time the two presidents had met since November 2022. The highly anticipated meeting came after U.S.-China relations had hit a particularly low point. The two sides agreed to resume military communications and work together to combat the flow of fentanyl into the U.S., but the sticking points remain two, from so-called chip wars to thornier issues such as Taiwan. Towards the end of a solo press conference, Mr. Biden repeated his view that Mr. Xi is a dictator while answering a question. China's foreign ministry called the remark irresponsible political manipulation, but it doesn't appear to have soured Beijing's portrayal of the meeting. Meanwhile, a U.S.-China relations expert says it wasn't necessary for U.S. President Joe Biden to call the Chinese President Xi Jinping a dictator following a 4-hour meeting between the superpower leaders on Wednesday. Robert Ross, a Boston College political science professor and associate at Harvard University's Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies, was reacting to President Biden's comment, adding that the insult at the president of China doesn't create a good foundation going forward.
That wasn't particularly necessary. Here he is trying to create a better environment for U.S.-China relations, and he proceeds to cast an insult at the president of China. It doesn't create a good foundation going forward. I don't think it will undermine any of the accomplishments, but it wasn't necessary. A more sophisticated response would have been helpful. Dictator usually means one-man rule. So there are a lot of authoritarian countries around the world, a lot of totalitarian countries around the world, but it's not necessarily so that one person controls everything. And so it's not clear that's an accurate description. Now, Xi Jinping is clearly very powerful and is more powerful than ever before. But on the other hand, he is encountering some criticism from his COVID policies. He's encountering criticism from the decline in the economy. So to say that he is a dictator and can control the country at whim, that's probably an exaggeration. Well, these dialogues and these meetings don't really address the fundamental underlying sources of conflict. So we do have a conflict over Taiwan, and dialogue and communication isn't going to help. So the president says, we're going to continue with our Taiwan policy. We know you don't like it. And President Xi Jinping says, we don't like your Taiwan policy, and it could cause deep trouble. So despite the fact that they've met and they've had a dialogue and they apparently improved the atmosphere, the dangers that come from the Taiwan issue haven't been relieved. And both sides need to work with great care to make sure this doesn't lead to unintended consequences.
Meanwhile, the U.S. president has hailed the power of the Pacific in his toast at a gala dinner for heads of delegations at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco. Thursday's dinner came on the heels of a high-stakes summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, where he and Mr. Biden reached agreements covering fentanyl, military communications, and, of course, artificial intelligence on the sidelines of the APEC summit. APEC members have been closely watching developments between U.S. and China, the world's two largest economies and strategic rivals, concerned that intense competition could upset global trade and security. APEC accounts for about 62% of global GDP and almost half of global trade. It does not, though, include India, the world's most populous country, but the South Asian nation was invited to attend as a guest economy.
We gather this week in San Francisco at an inflection point in history. One of the full new challenges, it's not only challenges, but new threats as well. But we have to never forget that we can change and bend the arc of history for the better if we make up our mind to do it. That together we can harness the power of the Pacific to grow our economies, to uplift our workers, to protect our planet, to connect our people to one another and the future of greater prosperity and dignity for all. So please join me in raising your glass to our people, to the Pacific, and to the possibilities of all we can do together. Hear, hear. Welcome.
In the meantime, China is urging the U.S. to stop disrupting the global semiconductor industry's production and supply chains, calling a U.S. criminal investigation into semiconductor equipment maker Applied Materials economic weaponization. The largest U.S. semiconductor equipment maker is being probed by the Justice Department for sending equipment to SMIC via South Korea without export licenses. The U.S. had restricted shipments of advanced chips and chip-making equipment to China for national security, and the Justice and Commerce Departments launched a task force earlier this year to investigate and prosecute criminal violations of export controls. The rules are aimed at stemming the flow of U.S. technology that could be used to bolster China's military and intelligence capabilities. And for over a year now, the Biden administration has put strict limits on U.S. chip-making equipment exports to China in an effort to slow down the main competitor's progress in making advanced semiconductors and dominating that market. A new report, however, shows that China doesn't seem to slow down at all. Well, Lars Holter is with Deutsche Welle and has been following the story. He joins us now from Berlin. Lars, good to see you. What can you tell us about this new report?
Well, thanks for having me. This report was released by the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, and they're looking at those export curbs which seek to bar Chinese chip makers from getting U.S. chip-making tools if they would be used to manufacture advanced chips at the 14 nanometer node or below. So that would be extremely intricate chips for only the most high-end users. Long story short, the ban so far has not slowed down China's efforts in the field. Just recently, Chinese telecoms giant Huawei, together with SMIC, was able to produce an advanced 7 nanometer chip to power its Mate 60 smartphone. And ever since, the US government has been scrambling to figure out how they did it, despite those export curbs. Now, both Huawei and SMIC have been standing on these trade restriction lists since 1920 and 1919 even. So in theory, US suppliers have been barred from shipping certain technology to the companies anyway. However, the report says that there might be loopholes. First of all, there is a chance that SMIC got their hands on some equipment prior to October of last year when the rules were tightened, or there is a possibility that importers could still get certain equipment if they claim it is being used on an older production line and not to manufacture new high-end chips. That, however, according to the report, would then be very difficult to verify.
And for years, Lars, the U.S., like many other Western countries, has relied on Chinese technology. So why exactly is the Biden administration trying so hard to slow China down, and why now?
Well, generally, China is kind of being avoided as a main partner these days. And even though Presidents Biden and Xi have just met in California partially to discuss trade, there seemed to be some tension, and the topic of semiconductors wasn't even discussed, or if it really was, there was at least no statement from either one of the two leaders. Anyway, over time, China has become such a dominant player in many sectors of the global economy that Western countries are trying to distance themselves. And these ultra-high-tech semiconductors are definitely one area where we can see this change. So the problem here is these chips of the very latest generation, again, we're talking 14 and even 7 nanometer technology here, are likely used in the development of artificial intelligence systems. And if that doesn't sound scary enough, they are also likely to be used in military technology. And that is exactly what Washington is concerned about. The White House recently said that they're not even interested in going after consumer technology, for example. So whether or not the latest Huawei smartphone is using some sort of super chip or not, that is apparently not even the question. It is military uses and, as I said, AI. And given latest AI developments and experience, many experts around the world are afraid that politically motivated abuse of that technology could be just as dangerous to the global community than straight-up military technology.
Right. Scary and dangerous are some of the words you used. And what's the European perspective on all of this?
Yeah, Europe has long been smack in the middle of that conflict between the US and China because pretty early on it was clear that an export ban in chip-making technology, for example, would only work if other countries would join the action as well. Otherwise, we would have just seen a shift from one country supplying the Chinese to another country. So Japan and with regards to Europe, the Netherlands joined the US action. In the Netherlands, it would be a chip maker ASML, that is one of Europe's biggest tech companies and a key supplier to global chip makers, including, of course, those in China. Now, this latest report indicating that export curbs might not have reached their goal touches on those Japanese and Dutch firms as well. And that is because it took them almost a year to put their own export curbs in place. That's a year after the US did it. And now it seems that China might have used this period to stockpile equipment in the first 8 months of this year, pretty much between the US banning exports and the other ones following suit. China has imported $3.2 billion worth of semiconductor manufacturing machines from the Netherlands, pretty much doubling the imports from the previous year. So once again, we're seeing that European and US policy have to be closer aligned to really be effective.
Right, Lars, thank you for your time today. And still to come on the program. Guinness World Records celebrates talented people around the globe with a special day to recognize talent. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. We're staying in Europe. Pedro Sanchez has been sworn in as Spain's new Prime Minister by King Felipe. This comes after Spain's parliament voted to make Mr. Sanchez Prime Minister for another term, and in a protracted deadlock after an inconclusive general election in July. His Spanish Socialist Workers' Party reached separate deals with a number of regional parties to earn their backing, including a contentious bill on amnesty for Catalan separatists that has sparked protests across Spain. Mr. Sanchez had 179 votes in favor and 171 against, a close score. With no abstentions, he is expected to name his new cabinet during the weekend. Meanwhile, people have taken to the streets of Madrid to protest Mr. Pedro Sanchez's emergence as Prime Minister for yet another term. Well, thousands of students across Australia have skipped school on Friday to demand climate action and call for investment to be stopped in coal and gas projects. Thousands of people, children and adults alike, marched through the streets of Melbourne, whilst hundreds gathered outside the Federal Environment Minister's office in Sydney. Australia climate scientists David Carrolley and Nick Abel had pre-signed climate doctors' certificates to excuse participating students from school. The note cited symptoms such as increased anxiety from climate policy inaction and elevated stress on seeing the impacts of the climate emergency as reasons to take a sick day.
We're hoping to achieve shifting the power away from fossil fuels because, you know, the Labour government is just all about fossil fuels. They've approved 4 new coal projects in this term alone, and it's time to shift the power away from fossil fuels, or else we're going to be seeing more and more bushfires, more and more heat waves. We all know what it felt like in 2019 when the massive bushfires swept through Australia. And the Labour government is simply just pouring more fuel on the fire by approving new coal and gas in Australia.
I think it's very important to protect our future. If we continue this way, none of us are going to have a future, none of our children are going to have futures.
I am frankly really scared of my future. The current trajectory we're going at, I am not going to have a future, or I'm going to have a really, really messed up future because of this government's irresponsibility to do anything about the climate crisis we are in right now.
I mean, my message is that climate change is a very real, very dangerous threat to both our future and to us now, and that our government just simply isn't doing enough to combat it, and in fact actually making it worse through their continued support of coal and gas.
Children fighting for change. Let's move on. The World Meteorological Organization, WMO, says the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere reached a record high last year, warning there's no end in sight to this trend. The warning comes weeks before world leaders are due to gather in Dubai for the annual UN climate conference, COP28, which will see governments push for greater climate action, including a possible phase-out of fossil fuels before 2050. WMO Secretary General Petteri Talas said that higher concentrations of greenhouse gases would be accompanied by more extreme weather events, including intense heat and rainfall, ice melt, higher sea levels, as well as ocean heat and acidification.
We have shown in the report that we have again broken less comfortable records in main greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide. And for example, now we have 150% more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we had during the pre-industrial times. And what this means that we have such high concentrations of especially carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It means that we have started increase of the melting of the glaciers. For example, here in Switzerland, the Swiss glaciers lost more than 10% of their mass during the past 2 summers, and we know from the history when we were having similar concentrations of carbon dioxide that the sea level was 10 to 20 meters higher than today. So gradually, the mountain glaciers will disappear mostly by the end of this century, and then we will have Greenland and an Antarctic glacier left, and they're going to melt for up to thousands of years. And the conservative estimate that will contribute half meter to 1 meter per century sea level rise. So this carbon dioxide concentration today is a problem for the cryosphere.
Workers at hundreds of Starbucks stores walked off their jobs during a key promotional event, demanding improved staffing and schedules. The walkout comes on the coffee chain's Red Cup Day event, during which Starbucks hands out free red-colored, reusable, holiday-themed cups to customers on their coffee purchases. Red Cup Day has typically been a major driver of store traffic, with data showing that visits to U.S. Starbucks stores on the day last year jumped 94% over the daily average for the full year. Workers United, which represents more than 9,000 Starbucks employees at about 360 U.S. stores, said that the event was one of the most infamously hard understaffed days, as drink orders pile up and employees end up on the receiving end of abuse from frustrated customers over long wait times. The house and surrounding grounds where Adolf Hitler was born will be turned into a police station housing up to 50 officers. The Austrian Interior Ministry made the decision following years of debate over how best to prevent the place becoming a pilgrimage site for neo-Nazis. Although Hitler was born in Braunau in 1889, Austria argued for decades that it was the first victim of National Socialism, having been annexed by Hitler's Germany in 1938. Recent governments have, however, recognized that Austrians were also perpetrators of Nazi crimes and that there was little resistance to Hitler's rule. In 2011, Braunau made headlines when it revoked the Nazi dictator's honorary citizenship, even though he never actually was awarded one. The town council at the time voted unanimously to strip Hitler of any honors he may have received, and which did not expire automatically when he died by his own hand in a Berlin bunker in 1945. Talented people around the globe who have been busy breaking records doing all kinds of things, from pogo sticking to hand skipping, are being celebrated this Guinness World Records Day. let's now get to that Guinness story which is crept in there. Talented people around the globe were busy breaking records, doing all kinds of things, from pogo sticking to hand skipping, are being celebrated by the organization. In the UK, Paul Swift got set up at a famous motor racing course, Silverstone, and set a new world record for the tightest gap driven through by a pickup truck on two wheels after he squeezed through the gap of 88 centimeters. Swift said he felt fantastic about this. Other record breakers include a team in Japan who skipped on their hands and broke the record for the most consecutive double Dutch-style handstand skips, team of two. There was joy in China as well for Zhu Quan, who limbered up and set new records for the most consecutive leg full twist back somersaults, doing 11 in a row. Henry Cabalas now currently holds 8 records after he achieved the highest backflip pogo stick jump, making it over a height of 3.07 meters.
I've been driving on 2 wheels since the age of 7. I started on the garden lawnmower. So to get a world record that recognises that is fantastic. And obviously to do it as part of Guinness World Records Day, it just makes it even the sweeter.
Guinness World Records Day is a global celebration of the superlative. It's a chance for you to attempt a Guinness World Records title and maybe even make your way into the Guinness World Records book. We've got loads of record-breaking activities happening all around the world. In the USA, we've got pogo sticking, gymnastics in China, hand skipping in Japan. There's loads going on.
This is my 8th record now today, or I currently hold 8 now, and I feel pretty good about that. That just makes me want to go for 10 now. So I got to start thinking about the other ones.
Well, that's our program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jacka Rogers. Bye for now.